I found a prehistoric MMA meme that built the perfect fighter. And it got me thinking, what would the perfect fighter look like in today's UFC? And that's exactly what we're going to find out today. Because together, you and I are going to be doing our very own Build-A-Bear by creating a UFC fighter piece by piece using only fighters on the current roster. If we somehow don't create the greatest fighter that you've ever seen by the end of this video, you have my word that I'll watch Ian Gary press conference compilations for 10 hours straight as punishment for not fulfilling my end of the deal. But first, before we dive into the video, we have a quick word from our sponsors. This is Troy. You don't want to be like him. Just look at him. He's pathetic. And do you know why he's pathetic? Because he doesn't even know what the Underdog Fantasy app is. And now he's about to say, what's the Underdog Fantasy app? Shut up, Troy, I'm getting to that. Underdog Fantasy is the app where you can make entries on your favorite sporting events, including MMA. For example, you can select higher or lower on your favorite MMA fighters' projections, and if you get them right, you can win up to 100 times your money. All you have to do is download the app, and when you sign up and make your first deposit, use code TROY and they'll double your deposit up to $100. Not only that, but when you do sign up and you use the code TROY, you help Troy's channel, and trust me, he needs all the help he can get. Isn't that right, Troy? Now, get out of here. Go. Huge thank you to Underdog Fantasy for being a sponsor of this channel, and there will be links in the description below so that you can sign up. We'll start at the very top with our fighter's fight IQ or brain, whatever you want to call it. Now, what is fight IQ? Fight IQ to me is the ability to turn a fight into a chess match. Someone with great fight IQ is always thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead, and they've mapped out every move that you might or might not make and what adjustments they'll do based upon that. An example would be the feint that they're making right now in round 1 is all to set up the punch that ends the fight in round 4. Someone with great fight IQ also makes adjustments on the fly. If they see even the slightest sign of weakness, they'll shift their entire game plan to attack it at a moment's notice. The ability to adapt while simultaneously thinking ahead is really what separates the good from the great fighters. I don't think many people would debate that Alexander Volkanovski has one of the best. The man isn't just a fighter, he's a walking, talking, punch-throwing supercomputer. And if you come in here saying, oh, Troy, he just got knocked out twice. First of all, no, he didn't. Second of all, fine, he did. But if you fight long enough, you're going to get knocked out eventually. Unfortunately, age catches up to everyone, even Alex. But I don't think that takes away from his fight IQ at all. Just roll the tape and it's undeniable that this man has one of the best, if not the best, fight IQs in all of the UFC. Now here's one you probably didn't think of. It's time to take a look at our fighter's eyes. And when I say eyes, I don't mean the ability to see what's coming or having really, really good vision. This may be a personal bias, but to me, the perfect fighter has eyes that are so striking, they're distracting. And for that reason, we're giving our athlete Brian Ortega's eyes. I mean, shit, just look at him. Anyways, this guarantees that anyone doing a stare down with our fighter is going to question their sexuality more than my dad questions mine. On to the mouth. What that mouth do, right, guys? Not every fighter trash talks, and it's definitely not a requirement that to be a great fighter, you have to be someone who's always trying to get to your opponent's head. But remember, this is our perfect fighter. And the perfect fighter, to me, uses every single tool at his disposal to get an edge. And absolutely no one who's on the roster right now is better at talking shit than Conor McGregor. But let me be clear on this one. When I think about this in my head, I'm only really thinking about pre-proper 12 Conor. I personally know more than a few zoo animals that have more cage time than Conor since this whole proper 12 era began. And with less time in the cage, it meant less trash talk in general. And then there was that time when Conor was trying to be nice to his opponents, like when he fought Donald Cerrone and then Dustin Poirier for the second time. And it seems like Conor's trash talk over the last few years has taken a complete nosedive in quality. So to just sum that whole thing up, our fighter is going to have the mouth of prime Conor McGregor. Now we move on to the chin. This one was a tough one. At first, like everybody else is probably already thinking, I thought it has to be Max Holloway. He's taken more shots to the face than your favorite adult star, and despite that, he's still never been knocked down as far as I know. I was ready to give our perfect fighter his chin until I saw this old tweet of his where he posted himself getting knocked out for the very first time. Just roll the tape.
Never push it over.
Yeah, that is exactly what it looks like. Max got knocked out by the forces of gravity, and I'm telling you, there's one man out there that would never, ever let that happen. And that Italian man is Marvin Vettori. Jokes aside, we all know you can't go wrong with either of their chins, but I have these fresh images of Vettori getting CTE'd by Cannonier while he set the most significant strikes record. And yeah, I'm going with the guy that puts his shorts on backwards. Time to make our way to our fighter's nose. To be honest, I never really even would have thought about a nose being important to our fighter's fighting success at all, but that was until I remembered this bombshell that got dropped on us. This wall of text that I will not be reading was the bomb dropped on us by DDP's coach. However, I will sum it all up by saying that until recently when DDP had his nose surgery, he was getting just 8% oxygen intake through his nose. And since that surgery, he's obviously gone on a nice little streak and become middleweight champion. And after hearing about that, it occurred to me that our fighter needs maximum snorting capacity. And DDP's run after his surgery proves that his nose is the one for the job. So yes, our Frankenstein fighter is going to inherit DDP's nose, ensuring that each breath that we take is just taking us one step closer to victory. And hats off to Drickus for showing us that a good nose isn't just for hitting the slopes on a Saturday. Now, before we get to the rest of our fighter's body, we have to make one last pit stop at our fighter's hair. While you might think that hair is just a decorative crown that doesn't matter, I want you to think about this. Great haircuts are memorable. And if we want our fighter to be remembered forever as the greatest of all time, he definitely needs a nice haircut. From Sean O'Malley's cotton candy mop to Figgy's God of War haircut, we have quite a few options that we could go with here. But ultimately, I was thinking that something more classic would probably be best suited for our fighter, which is why I'm going with Jim Miller's mullet, because nothing says I can change your carburetor or I can choke you out quite like a well-groomed mullet does. And really, who doesn't like a good mullet? Let's roll up our sleeves and take a look at our left arm. But before we do, if you've made it this far in the video and you're feeling generous enough to leave a like, comment, or even subscribe, it really helps the channel and it makes my cat really happy. But back to our fighter's arm. For the limbs of our fighter, I was thinking strictly about striking, and later on in the video, I'm going to break down the grappling section completely separate. And to start our limbs off, we need a left arm that strikes absolute fear into our opponent's hearts. Obviously, prime Conor McGregor comes to mind because he had an absolute laser for a left hand. But before I even get started, I think we know who we really need for the left arm. Handsome Squidward himself, aka Alex Pereira. Because why settle for a laser when you can have a cannon? Our fighter's gonna have the left hook of death on his side, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. Now let's shift our focus over to the more popular right arm. Once again, we have a lot of options here. There's Sean O'Malley's right, that's a lot like Conor's in the way that Sean uses it like a sniper. Then there's Josh Emmett, who spams overhand rights that land like Thor's hammer. And if you don't believe me, just ask Bryce Mitchell. But for our right arm, I wanted something that's just a bit more versatile. A right arm that not only has the hand speed and the power, but also the technique to throw any straight, hook, or overhand that causes the potential knockout. And I don't think there's anyone in the UFC right now that fits that description more accurately than Ilia Topuria. He definitely has the touch of death in both hands, but that right hand is a thing of beauty. With Alex's left arm and Topuria's right, it's going to be a short list of fighters that could ever stand and trade with us in the pocket. Okay, I know we just did arms, but I feel like we have to do the elbows as well. This is going to be my tribute to the old Tony Ferguson. The Tony that I remember used to rearrange the faces of his opponents using just his elbows, and he used to be able to flawlessly slide cancel during his pre-fight ritual, but we know that those days are long gone. Prime Tony turned the cage into his very own cooking show. The canvas was his cutting board, and he'd just start slicing away using those razors that he called elbows. Having Tony's elbows isn't just about damage, it's about being inside the mind of our opponent before the fight even starts, because in their head, they're thinking, I may leave this fight looking like this, or this, or this. Who put that there? Anyways, Tony's elbows are now ours. Let's now point our attention to the fingers. And yes, our fighter does need a good set of digits, and I'm going to explain why right now. Not every fight's going to be clean. There are going to be fights where we need a nice eye poke to even the playing field. Or maybe the fight's not going our way, and what we really need is a stealthy cage grab that keeps us from getting crotch sniffed. And with that being said, our masterpiece will be receiving Leon Edwards' fingers. They don't call the man Edward Scissorhands for nothing. He can eye poke with the best of them, just ask Bilal. And he's been known to slip a few cage grabs in there as well. Now, the core of every single fighter is their heart. Heart's something I feel like is not talked about enough. You'll hear people talk about certain fighters quitting in the middle of a fight when it gets tough, and I do think that that's a real thing. There is a very noticeable difference between fighters who know that they can live to fight another day and the fighters who win or lose are literally willing to die in the cage. There's going to be times that no matter how perfectly we build our fighter, they're going to have their off day. And on those off days, they might be on the back foot. And there's going to be times when our fighter's just completely losing and they need the grit and the heart to stay in it and battle back for a comeback win. There's not a man on the roster that embodies the phrase never give up more than Darren Elkins. The man being 40 and still choosing to go to war in this sport is just more proof of that. There's been countless fights where he's getting beat down, but never has even come close to looking like the thought of giving up has even entered his mind. When our fighter does inevitably face adversity, he's going to have the spirit of Darren Elkins on his side, ready to turn any potential defeat into a Hollywood script. The great Vince Lombardi once said, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all," which is why we have to talk about cardio. Cardio wins fights, plain and simple. You can be an average fighter who ends up beating a fighter much more skilled than you just off of weaponizing your cardio. If you've got a little bit of a chin, some heart, and some cardio, you are a dangerous, dangerous fighter. We've seen it time and time again where guys are getting their ass kicked, but come round 3, he's the one who's out there putting the fight away because he's still got something left in the tank. Nate Diaz had countless fights where this exact scenario played out. Then there's someone like Colby Covington, where he weaponizes his cardio and turns it into relentless pressure. You may be able to deal with the pressure for a round or two, but can you do it all without gassing out? And the answer for most fighters is no. We need the type of cardio where we can fight 5 rounds and then look like we still have something left in the tank to go chill in the hot tub with the boys after the fight. When I sit and think about peak cardio in the UFC today, there's not a name that pops up in my head more than Merab. His cardio is so good that I think you could put his gas tank up against any fighter who's ever fought in the octagon, and I think his cardio matches up or surpasses just about anyone that you could possibly think of. I mean, just look at what he did to Petr Yan. He shot 49 takedowns on poor Peter. Yeah, fucking 49 of them. And at the end of the fight, he still looked like he could go another 5 rounds. And now, through the power of television, we're going to be able to do the exact same thing. Now we're finally diving into the lower body, and we're going to start with the left leg. For the left leg, I was kind of thinking of something that was very similar to our right arm. I wanted someone whose left leg is like a Swiss Army knife and can literally do it all. Or maybe use their teep kick as a jab. Or even from time to time use a perfectly executed question mark kick. There were 2 people that came to mind and probably came to yours as well. And for me, it was Wonderboy Thompson and Israel Adesanya. Me being the Wonderboy fan that I am, I think he's the best kickboxer to ever step foot in the UFC, so we're going to be using his. If you wanted Izzy's leg, I'm sorry, maybe next time. Now let's transition on over to the right leg. Since our left leg already has a bit of finesse, I was thinking our right leg needs to be something with a bit more raw power, something with a lot of ferocity. And when it comes to finishing people with their right leg, there's Edson Barbosa, and then there's everybody else. He's finished people via calf kicks, kicks to the liver, and of course, kicks to the head. His right leg is truly a weapon of mass destruction. When Wonderboy throws a kick, it's graceful, and when Edson throws a kick, it's straight up nasty. And now, we have the best of both worlds. Now, what about our butt? Yeah, you heard me right, I'm talking about the ass. The perfect warrior needs a perfect pair of glutes. I can't think of a single movement in MMA where a strong pair of glutes isn't needed, or at the very least makes things easier. And from just a looks perspective, do you really think that the perfect fighter has an ass flatter than 3-day-old Sprite? I don't think so, and I don't think you do either. I can hear people screaming right now, Troy, it has to be Mackenzie Dern. Just look at this clip of Henry Cejudo coaching up Dern.
Fatter the butt or whatever, the bigger it is, the easier it is to get the grip.
Did you notice anything strange about that video? Yeah, I noticed it too. Henry's cakes outshine Mackenzie's in the side-by-side. I'm sorry, you guys can hate me all you want, but the truth hurts. So yes, our fighter will have Henry's cheeks for both aesthetic reasons and for functionality. Now let's take a short trip from the butt to our fighter's sword. Some historians have called it the meat hammer, the pork sword, and my personal favorite, the one-eyed snake. And if you didn't figure it out, yes, our perfect fighter is a man, and I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to get over it if you have an issue with it. Now back to the point at hand. I've put this in another video before, but it's just so fantastic. I feel like I have to bring it up one more time. I was just like you. I didn't think that there was any possible way where your trouser snake would ever have an impact on an MMA fight. But that was until I witnessed Ciryl Gane using the most vicious meat strikes I've ever seen. I know Francis Ngannou still thinks about those today. And for everyone in the comments who's saying, oh, it's just air blowing through his shorts, you can believe whatever you want to believe. And I choose to believe that Ciryl Gane is a master of the art of 5 limbs. We're sticking with the theme where we take every single advantage available to us, and this is no different. Thank you, Ciryl, for gifting us your dong. Now that we've got our body pretty much figured out, I said before that when we were choosing our limbs, we were focusing purely on striking. Now it's time to break down the ground game and the grappling completely separately. And we're going to start off with takedown defense. In today's UFC, takedown defense has to be one of the most important attributes, if not the most important attribute for any fighter. You can be the most exciting knockout artist in the world, but none of it matters if you can't stop a takedown. And that's why we're never going to put ourselves in that situation. Obviously, Kamaru Usman stands out with a legendary takedown defense percentage. But right now in the UFC, there's one man who's been in the UFC for a long time who has the highest takedown defense percentage, and that's Jon Bones Jones, sitting at 95%. For Jon to have fought as many dangerous grapplers and wrestlers as he has and his takedown defense be that high is incredible. Not to mention that he's been fighting now in the UFC for over a decade, so that makes that number even more impressive. And now with his takedown defense on our side, no one, and I mean no one, is ever going to try and crotch sniff us. Let's flip the same coin and now look at our takedowns. I want to reiterate, it's not our first option to take down anyone, because we'd rather knock him out, but we do need some takedown offense as an insurance plan. I was going to list off all of his accomplishments and maybe throw some stats in there, but I don't think I even need to, because we're going to be taking the takedowns of Islam Makhachev. It's as simple as when he wants you on the mat, you might as well put down a pillow and a blanket because you're going down. Another grappling element that I wanted to focus on by itself was the control aspect. Specifically, we're going to take a fighter's cage and ground control. I hope to God we'll never need it because we'll be too busy stuffing takedowns and knocking anyone out who even thinks about taking us down. But nonetheless, just like the takedown offense, we do need an insurance plan. And who knows, maybe there comes a fight where we need a lay and pray win. So for that, we're going to take Kamaru Usman's control. He's been known to lay and pray every once in a while, which is fine. He was a great champion. And on top of that, he's currently ranked 4th all time for most total control time ever in the cage, sitting at a whopping 2 hours and 13 minutes of total control time. That's a lot of time to be controlling another man, but I have a feeling everybody watching this video probably likes that. Now moving on, we all know that we can't talk about grappling without Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in today's UFC. BJJ's importance in MMA can't be understated, but it's important to note that not all BJJ transfers over well to MMA. For example, we've seen it with someone like Kron Gracie, who's a BJJ expert, but we've watched him butt scoot his way to absolutely nowhere. It goes without saying that we need someone with great submissions because we're never planning to take this to the judges' scorecards, which is why I don't think this will surprise anybody because we're stealing Charles Oliveira's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Even when Charles gets knocked down, he's never out, as we've seen him put people away on his back. He's got an extremely aggressive style of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that transfers over to MMA very, very well. He's always looking for a finish, and so are we. The final part of the grappling section that I don't think gets anywhere close to enough love is the clinch. Great dirty boxing is a lost art at this point, but Valentina Shevchenko not only has a great clinch game because of her dirty boxing, but she also masterfully utilizes trips and sweeps in a way that makes her clinch so dangerous. She can elbow you to the face, toss you to the ground, and then dance on your corpse. Getting stuck in the clinch with Valentina is like fighting an octopus wearing a suit of armor. Good luck finding an opening. And with that, we've finally completed our fighter, and it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's sit back and look at our masterpiece in all of its glory. Jesus Christ, we have truly built a monster today. You know, in my head, I thought that our perfect fighter would look a lot less freakish and a lot more cool, but what can you do? Our fighter will not be winning any beauty contests, and he may walk with a limp because he's lopsided on all of his limbs, but he'll do it as a champion with a perfect ass. If there's anything that you would have changed about our fighter, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and make sure to wash your hands.